In November 1943, a wooden pine box arrived at a railway station in California. Inside was the body of a 27-year-old pilot, killed when her aircraft crashed during an engineering test flight over Texas. There was no military honor guard standing on the platform. There was no American flag draped over the casket. There was no bugler to play taps, and no military officer to present a folded flag to her mother. Instead, the shipment arrived via commercial railway freight, marked with a collect shipping invoice that her family had to pay out of their own pockets before taking the casket home. Her name was Mabel Rawlinson. She had spent months flying high-performance twin-engine bombers for the United States Army Air Forces. She lived in military barracks, woke to bugle calls, and logged hundreds of hours in military cockpits. Yet, under federal law, Mabel Rawlinson was not a soldier. She was a civilian civil service employee. Between 1942 and 1944, over 1,000 American women flew more than 60 million miles in every operational warplane in the U.S. inventory. They tested damaged bombers, trained artillery crews under live fire, and ferried high-speed fighters across the continent. Popular memory often remembers them as a romantic pioneering milestone in aviation history. But official administrative records reveal a harsher operational reality, a program that began as an emergency administrative stopgap, placing civilians inside high-risk military cockpits, only to abandon them the moment political pressures shifted. To understand how civilian women ended up flying military bombers, you have to look at the catastrophic pilot shortage facing the United States in the autumn of 1942. American factories were producing warplanes at an unprecedented rate. Thousands of new P-38 Lightnings, P-51 Mustangs, B-17 Flying Fortresses, and C-47 transports were rolling off assembly lines in California, Michigan, and New York every month. These aircraft had to be flown immediately from manufacturing plants to modification centers, coastal airfields, and shipping ports across North America. At the same time, the Army Air Forces was expanding its combat units in Europe and the Pacific. Every qualified male pilot sitting in a domestic ferry cockpit was a pilot who wasn't flying combat missions against the Luftwaffe or the Imperial Japanese Navy. The ferry system was clogging. Factory tarmacs were overflowing with brand new aircraft waiting for pilots to move them. To break the bottleneck, 2 female aviators approached the military with independent proposals. Nancy Harkness Love, a veteran commercial pilot, suggested recruiting highly experienced female aviators to handle domestic transport aircraft. Jacqueline Cochran, a famous record-setting pilot, proposed a mass training school to train thousands of women to fly military aircraft. In late 1942, General Henry Hap Arnold, Chief of the Army Air Forces, approved both initiatives. In August 1943, they were merged into a single organization, the Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP, directed by Jacqueline Cochran. Over 25,000 American women applied for the program. Out of those, just over 1,800 were accepted for training, and slightly more than 1,000 actually graduated to earn their silver wings. Applicants had to hold a valid pilot's license, log dozens of hours of flight time, and pass rigorous medical and psychological exams. The primary training base was Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, a dusty airfield surrounded by miles of flat mesquite country. On the tarmac, the program operated under strict military discipline. Trainees wore oversized men's flight suits nicknamed zoot suits, marched in formation, slept in unheated barracks, woke at 5 in the morning, and underwent hundreds of hours of navigation, meteorology, engine mechanics, and instrument flight instruction. They learned to recover from spins, execute blind instrument landings, and handle high-performance engines. Yet, on paper, the entire operation was an administrative paradox. The trainees were not enlisted in the U.S. Army. They were classified as civilian civil service employees working on a probationary contract for the Army Air Forces. While male aviation cadets were officially sworn into the military, given free uniforms, medical coverage, and military insurance, WASP trainees paid for their own meals, bought their own dress uniforms, and paid for their own transportation to Texas. By 1943, over 1,000 women had graduated from Avenger Field and were assigned to operational bases across the country. Their duties quickly expanded far beyond ferrying basic trainer aircraft. They were assigned to the most demanding, unglamorous, and dangerous domestic flying missions in the military. At Camp Davis, North Carolina, WASP pilots were assigned to the Target Squadron. Their job was to fly slow, steady patterns over coastal gunnery ranges while dragging a 30-foot canvas sleeve behind their aircraft. On the ground and on ships below, green anti-aircraft artillery crews fired live ammunition at the canvas target. Shrapnel from anti-aircraft shells routinely tore through the wings and fuselages of the planes towing the targets. At other bases, WASPs served as test pilots for aircraft returning from major depot overhauls. When a B-26 Marauder, a fast, notoriously unstable twin-engine bomber nicknamed the Widowmaker, suffered an engine repair, male pilots often hesitated to take the aircraft up for its first post-repair test flight. Army Air Forces commanders routinely assigned WASP pilots to fly the test runs, proving to male crews that the aircraft was safe. When rumors spread that the new B-29 Superfortress heavy bomber was dangerous and difficult to fly, General Arnold assigned 2 WASP pilots, Dougherty and Dorothea Johnson, to fly a B-29 on a tour of airbases, demonstrating that the massive bomber could be handled easily. Despite performing hazardous military flight duties, the WASPs remained trapped in a legal vacuum. Because they were civilian contractors, they were paid a flat civil service rate of $250 a month, less than a male lieutenant performing the same job. Because they were not military personnel, they were ineligible for government-sponsored national service life insurance. Private commercial insurance companies refused to issue policies to women flying military aircraft, or charged exorbitant premiums that few could afford. If a WASP pilot was injured in a crash, she had to pay for her own private hospital care or rely on the charity of local-based doctors. The full brutality of this classification was exposed when pilots died on duty. Between 1942 and 1944, 38 WASP pilots lost their lives in operational crashes, mid-air collisions, and mechanical failures. When a male pilot died, the War Department sent an official telegram, dispatched an escort officer to accompany the casket, provided a military flag, paid for burial expenses, and issued a pension to the surviving family. When a WASP died, the military did nothing. Fellow female pilots had to take up collections to pay for commercial railway shipping, accompany the body home on their own leave time, and explain to grieving families why the U.S. government refused to allow an American flag over the casket. From the beginning, General Arnold and Jacqueline Cochran intended for the WASP to be formally militarized into the Army Air Forces. In early 1944, legislation was introduced in Congress, House Bill 4219, to officially incorporate the WASP into the military, granting them rank, benefits, and protection. Instead of passing smoothly, the bill ran straight into a fierce political storm. By 1944, the war had shifted. The Army Air Forces began scaling back its domestic pilot training programs as air superiority was established in Europe. Thousands of male civilian flight instructors, men who had been exempt from the draft while teaching aviation cadets, suddenly faced losing their draft deferments and being sent into the infantry. Desperate to keep their flying jobs, these civilian male instructors launched a massive political lobbying campaign against the WASP. Supported by influential newspaper columnists and congressional allies, male lobbying groups argued that it was an expensive, unnecessary luxury to train women to fly when thousands of qualified male pilots were available for domestic transport. The media campaign turned hostile, and a powerful congressional investigative committee branded the program an unnecessary expense. In June 1944, the militarization bill was officially defeated on the House floor. With male pilots now available to handle domestic ferrying, General Arnold capitulated to political pressure. On October 1, 1944, he issued a directive announcing that the WASP would be completely disbanded before the end of the year. On December 20, 1944, while the Battle of the Bulge was raging in Europe, the WASP was quietly deactivated. The women received no GI Bill benefits, no educational support, no veteran health care, and no official discharge certificates. They paid for their own train tickets home, packed their men's flight suits into suitcases, and returned to civilian life. For over 30 years, the official Army Air Forces records of the WASP program remained classified and locked away in government archives. In the mid-1970s, when the U.S. Navy announced it was opening flight training to women for the first time in history, surviving WASP veterans reacted with outrage, leading a nationwide effort to set the record straight. In November 1977, 33 years after they were disbanded, Congress passed Public Law 95-202. President Jimmy Carter signed the bill into law, officially granting retroactive active duty military status and honorable discharges to the women Air Force service pilots. 3 decades later, in 2009, Congress awarded the surviving WASPs the Congressional Gold Medal. The story of the WASP is not a simple fable about aviation progress or military equality. It is a case study in how wartime logistics function. The U.S. military did not deploy over 1,000 civilian women into warplanes because it wanted to challenge gender roles. It deployed them because it faced a desperate shortage of pilots during a total war. When those women flew high-speed fighters, tow-target bombers, and experimental aircraft, they performed every duty required of a military officer, proving that in the cockpit of a warplane, the machine demands absolute skill, regardless of the legal title on the pilot's contract.